All right, so the first thing we're going to do is take the brakes out, kind of hang them out of the way a little bit. There's two 19 millimeter bolts for the caliper. Go ahead and grab those real quick. And hang the caliper out of the way, then we'll take the bracket off. I like to, before I move the caliper off, I like to kind of compress the piston a little bit. Just put a screwdriver in there. And just kind of pull back on the caliper a little. And that'll help it release, give you a little room to work. I'll get my hanger real quick. I'm just going to hang this off the control arm or whatever I can get a hold of here, and make sure it doesn't just flap around on the hose. And then we got two bolts on the inner here. I'm not sure if they're 19. It might be 21. Oh, they're 19 too. Almost feel smaller than 19, but I don't think they are. Yeah, they are. They're 18. Well, that's annoying. Go ahead and get these off. Hopefully the earthquake will take them off. Sometimes these can be pretty tight. Wow. Came off pretty easy. Sometimes those can be pretty tight. Of course, I hung the caliper right where I need to be. So I'm going to kind of lay this over out of the way for a second. And once you get those two out, you should be able to pull this bracket off with your brakes. And then the rotor should come off. We'll put this off to the side. Pull this rotor off. And the next thing we're going to do, I think I'm going to go ahead and pull the axle cap off here and pull the nut out. You got 3 bolts to hold these in, then you got the speed sensor, ABS sensor. So we'll go ahead and get the tools to do some of this, and then we'll come right back. I just use a screwdriver, a hammer, and pop this cap off. It's usually pretty easy to get off. We're going to take a 36 millimeter socket here, see if we can get this axle nut off. I take that off first on these because it helps to move the axle back a little bit sometimes when you're taking the bolts off for the bearing. Man, this thing is on there. So you go ahead and pull that off, and then take your washer off, put that off to the side. And then hopefully your axle will move in a little bit. I'm just going to tap on it real light. I'm not going to hit it enough to mess up the threads or anything. So I'm just kind of moving that in there, and we're going to get to these 3 bolts. And it'll probably help you to turn the wheel whichever way you're going for the bolts. Usually these 2 on the sides come out pretty easy. And then the one on the top, sometimes you have to use a opening or opening ratchet in because of the ball joint stud. I haven't looked at this one real close to see yet, but we're going to take them out. So there's 3 bolts. I believe they're 15 mil. Yeah, 15 millimeter. So we're gonna, well, like I said, you'll probably have to move the wheel. Right now I got the wheel pointing to the left so I can get to it a little bit easier. Plus it makes it easier when you're taking the caliper and stuff off. And we'll see how tight this is. It wasn't tight at all. You want to be careful too if you're using an extensor or something, not to screw your boot up. Just be careful of it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the wheel the other way, get that bottom one out, and then which will be the same way. And then usually this top one, you can't get the bolt all the way out. You can get it loose enough to get the bearing out, but you can't get it out all the way with the ball joint still in. So you can just take it off enough to get the bearing out and then put it back in. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the wheel, and then we'll do the top one. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get this top one off first. And you can either put 2 wrenches together and kind of pull up on them, or take a hammer and just kind of hit your wrench. I'm just going to put the 2 wrenches together and pull up on them. And it's pretty tight. Ugh. So I should be able to slide in a ratcheting wrench now. I don't like to put a lot of pressure on my ratcheting wrenches to start out, but that's how you get the top one. And the reason why you use the opening on these top ones is because you got the ball joint here. I really don't want to disturb the ball joint. You can take the ball joint loose and pop it out, but since it's not necessary, it only takes a few extra seconds to do it by hand like this with the opening. I'm not going to disturb the upper ball joint. And I'm pretty sure the new, I'll have to check, but I'm pretty sure the new wheel bearing comes with a whole new speed sensor, ABS sensor. So we'll have to just take it out, take the sensor loose, and unplug it up here under the wheel well. Replace it. And this is almost out. The problem we come into here is you got the axle here and the ball joint, so you just got to loosen this up. And normally you can't get this bolt all the way out because of the ball joint, it gets stuck on it, but you can get it out far enough to where it's not into the bearing anymore. And then I just use that as my guide. And now's a good time to take kind of a mental note of where the dust shield's at, since you're gonna, the new one doesn't come with a dust shield, of course, so you're gonna have to put the dust shield back where it's at. And I'll just kind of make a mental note. Obviously the open area is gonna be where your caliper's at, but just make a mental note of that, and then you're gonna have the little notch here for your line. So I think the next thing we'll do is go ahead and take a look at the new bearing and make sure it's got the line in it and what it comes with, and then we'll start taking this line, the ABS line, off, and then we should be able to knock this loose. I still got to take the other side bolt out. I'm just going to turn the wheel and use the impact like I did on this side, and then that should be it for that. Just going to kind of go down the line here. This was already off, and then take a screwdriver. You can pop this clip off, pop that clip off, and then pull this out. And the new one does come with a new sensor. They usually do. I just wanted to double check before I took it off. So now we should be able to just kind of knock this off if it's not too bad. Not really a good spot to hit it. Let me turn the wheel the other way and be able to hit it a little bit easier. But that's what we're looking at. All right, so I just turned the wheel so I can get a better hit on. I'm just going to hit it right here. Wow. A little surprised. I mean, not totally surprised, but sometimes you can be real dirty to get off, and I was kind of expecting this one to come off. Let me get out the air hammer real quick, and then we'll see what we can do with that. All right, it took me about 5 minutes to get this out. It's pretty rusted in there. You can see here where I kind of hammered on it. I used the Chief, the big air hammer, and I just kind of go back this way, then go this way, and kind of go back and forth until it starts to rotate and break the rust free. If you don't have an air hammer, you can beat on it, I guess. It's going to take a while, depending on you know how rusted it was. This one was pretty rusted in there. So I'm going to go ahead and just spray it all down and clean it out with a brush. And try to get as much rid of as much corrosion as I can with that, and then we'll pick it back up. I'm going to leave this bolt in here. You can see I've already got the, I'm going to take this off and get a brush in there, but I got this oriented where it's supposed to be, and I got this bolt kind of still started in there, so I'm going to go ahead and get a brush, clean this out, and then we'll set the new one in there and kind of start it. All right, so what I like to do, I think it makes it easier to straighten the wheel out, make sure everything's straight so nothing's twisted or, you know, working against you. I put the axle through and just kind of start the nut, and then I just start all 3 bolts. And you want to make sure they're started pretty well before you try to torque any of them down. You don't want to, because these are easy, it's easy to get these kind of off center a little bit, and then you're going in crooked or whatever. So make sure they're all really far in before you torque them down and get them real tight. I believe the torque spec's like 120 foot-pound on these, but I'll double check that. So I'm going to go ahead and just, you know, make sure you run your wire through the dust shield, and we'll go ahead and hook that up in a little bit, but make sure this is oriented right. You got the open area here for your caliper, and then you have the sensor coming through the hole here. And like I said, for me, just straightening the wheel out so the axle's not kind of trying to fight you and stuff makes it easier to start all 3 of them. And then once you get them all 3 started, you can go ahead and torque them down. These are all pretty much started and pretty far in, so I'm just going to go ahead and finish that up, and then we'll pick it back up. I ran this line. Make sure you run it under your brake lines. That's going to kind of come over it. You go ahead and just pop these in. This one broke off on my other one when I took it off, and part of it stayed in the frame. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Maybe I won't. Anyway, the little holder here broke off, and I had, here it is, broke off in the A-arm right there, so I had to take a drill and kind of drill out that plastic. It wasn't a big deal, but if they do break off, just take a little drill and a little bit and just kind of drill it out so that you can put it back in. So now that we got that done, should be able to start putting the brakes on, and we'll torque the we will torque the axle nut. I think it's about 170, but I'll double check that. You do want to torque them properly, just so you have it's kind of what holds the bearing together, and the bearing rides on there and all that good stuff. So it's good to use a torque wrench. I'll show you how I do that in a second by myself without anybody holding the brake or anything. If you have somebody who can hold the brakes while you're doing it, while you're actually torquing it, makes it a little bit easier. But if you're like me, you work by yourself all the time, there's another way to do it. Using a pry bar and just a couple of nuts. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten these up. Now, I'm sure these have a torque spec on the caliper bracket, but I use the German torque spec on that stuff, which is good and tight. And it helps if you go the right way. So you can see this is a pretty easy job. The hardest thing probably is going to be, if yours was rusted like mine, getting that old bearing out. That can be a real pain. And then lining the new bearing up and getting everything lined up sometimes can be a hassle. It's not too bad, but I found usually if I just straighten the wheel out and kind of make sure the axle and everything's straight, it will usually fall into place pretty good. And you can get them hand started. You can get them hand started pretty far before you actually put torque on it. And like I said before, make sure that you're all the way that they're in there pretty far before you torque on one. I like to kind of like go to pattern when I tighten them and just make sure that it's going down straight, because it will go. Even if you clean all the rust and stuff out, it has a tendency to want to bind up. And drop the bolt. Thought I had started on the bottom already. So what I'm going to do is pretty much done at this point, but what I'm going to do is find out the torque spec for this and show you how I torque them by myself, and then we'll end this out, put the wheel back on, it's ready to go. So it's 177 foot-pounds. I got a punch in between the caliper and the rotor here. That's how it holds it. And then I'm just going to pull up on this until we hit 177. That's 177 foot-pound. So you can't, there's a couple different ways to do it. The service manual says just do this, put a drift in there and let the caliper hold it. You could put your lug nuts back on and put a pry bar in between here, a long one, and do it. But this is just as easy. So anyway, that's about it. This should be good to go now on a 06 GMC front hub 4-wheel drive. Thanks for watching, and always God bless.